Hey, aspiring educators. I'm really excited to start our conversation tonight. Wish we were together so we could talk more. But just thank you in advance for these really thoughtful, exciting questions. Really had a fun time making some notes before filming the video. And more importantly, thank you for everything that you do all day long for our union and our schools, of course, with our students. I definitely know that our AEs are the future and the present. So just wanted to make sure to start off with a big message of solidarity and appreciation for you. So my name is Shannon McCann, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm really excited to be a candidate for the NEA Executive Committee. I've worked alongside our AE leaders on the NEA board ever since I was on the board. So starting, I think, with Ashley and then Rachel Cameo. And then, I turned off, but those years I've also served, supporting our AEs in Washington State. And that has been, really important work that our state has been part of, and that, of course, our AE leaders have been driving. So to jump into the questions, aspiring and early career educator or BIPOC educators are not being retained and recruited at the same rate as our white colleagues. Under your leadership, what will NEA do to change this? So first of all, my goal in all of my work is to partner with the folks that are most impacted by decisions. There's that saying, nothing about us without us. And I am fundamentally driven to include folks who are impacted by those decisions. So my first, part of this answer is that, well, I guess the, part of all the answers that I'll have tonight is that, our AEs are the experts. And so anything that I would be advocating for, it would be, in collaboration with our AEs to get it right. And, that's how we create change, right? We collaborate, we build coalition, and that's how we get lasting change that we need to see. The disproportionality surrounding retention and recruitment, to start, are genuinely a issue of, systems that are serving to oppress. And, when we're not retaining educators of color specifically, we know that that is a symptom of larger interconnected issues. I am very much, an outspoken advocate about addressing systems. And across our NEA enterprise, we absolutely can be doing more as a union to be ensuring that states and locals are prepared to, really be visionaries when it comes to the retention and recruitment of educators. I specifically talk about retention first and foremost because, if educators are already in the classroom and they're getting pushed out because of these forces, that's something that, locals and states should be doing something about. And then, of course, when it comes to recruitment issues, there's a lot of pressure that we can be putting on school districts. I really have seen how the deck is stacked against our aspiring ed and our educators of color who are entering the profession. I myself am, a younger, queer, first-time college attending educator, and I saw the barriers, and then I look at my colleagues and I can see that, for example, in my cohort in my master's alternative routes program where I got my teaching cert, there was only one educator of color. I mean, I could see it and we knew it, and the institutions were failing. Now that I'm in a position to be advocating in a different capacity, I think that some of the things that I would really like to lift up are, of course, the TPA and other barriers to, getting into education programs. But ultimately, we need multifaceted solutions for this complex issue. I would like to ensure that our AEs are out in front of any of our solutions and any of our work in that. That includes legislative solutions, that includes organizing planning, and just it's very, very real that our locals and states are not prepared to analyze the data, for example, to even know how bad the retention and recruitment numbers are. And of course, thinking of legislative solutions, one of the things that I'd be really interested in is continuing the collaboration with the staff team that I work with as the chair of the legislative committee to think about multifaceted solutions legislatively that would support the retention and recruitment of educators of color and all AEs, thinking of real life solutions like fair housing, healthcare, affordable college, childcare, you know, and then in addition, you know, thinking about state legislative solutions that can be generated as model language, and then, you know, shared with state affiliates to be advocating for. One of the promising things I would say is that the CTE programs at some of our middle school and high schools that are developing really quality, you know, teacher prep pathways, that is a really exciting way that we can be diversifying the profession and also truly robustly preparing folks for the profession, right? Because there is a massive, you know, part of white supremacy culture is just throwing our BIPOC folks into a profession without the support, without the time, without the resources, and then just wonder why they burn out. And so robustly preparing folks, as well as working to transform the systems that are so oppressive in the first place, you know, is the work that we need to do. I also am a big proponent of collective bargaining. I know not every state has that, but I, you know, in my role as an NEA executive committee member, hopefully, I would be really interested in advocating to have collective bargain language, you know, generated and shared with state and local affiliates that ensures that the supports are in place for educators once they're in the classroom, and to support them in remaining in the profession. You know, that looks like high quality investment in mentorship, high quality investment in, you know, the cohorts, so educator of color cohorts that are actually compensated, for example, thinking about how student teaching needs to be paid, thinking about materials and other supports in the classroom that make the world, you know, go round, because no AE should be, you know, spending money for their students during their student teaching. We know that happens though. Once, you know, someone is actually in the education profession, making sure that there are those materials, supports, times, resources in place. And a lot of that is driven through collective bargaining. Not every state has bargaining, of course, but where there can be, you know, model handbook language, for example, this is a really big opportunity for us. Because we're a profession of nearly, you know, 70% women, I'd also say that there's a gender dynamic here, that I would be interested in lifting up. And I mean, this is just part of the work that I always do, lifting up the gender justice aspect of this as well. Thinking about when we have our AEs in, you know, student teaching experiences, we may have, you know, a younger female of color in a mentorship situation with an older white male. What is it that we're doing to ensure that that's a safe and thriving space for our aspiring educator? You know, as NEA, are we thinking about, you know, model programming that districts can adopt and that, you know, unions from the local and state level can be adopting around sexual harassment training, other personal safety, you know, provisions, and, you know, really making sure that our locals are equipped with some really good ideas when it comes to organizing and bargaining efforts. I would be interested in, of course, you know, partnering with the NEA Center for Organizing on some of these efforts, particularly since there is a heightened internal awareness within our membership, but then even externally in the public eye, folks are understanding that there is a teacher shortage and that it's a crisis. So in this moment, making sure that, you know, we are prepared with real life solutions and with resources to support that work getting across the finish line. I think, you know, higher compensation, right? Like I know that the Biden administration saying $60,000 starting salary, like that's not a coincidence, right? That is our good work behind the scenes. We obviously have to get that done though. High quality mentorship, including paying the mentors so that we can have a more diverse, you know, mentorship cadre supporting our educators, and even thinking about leveraging some of our relationships with the National School Board Association and Principals Association around retention, because of course we don't agree with them on every single issue, but the teacher shortage and these systems that are oppressing folks to cause the teacher shortage in the first place, there is some shared interest around retention. Also, on this point, I'm lucky enough to be one of 3 locals in the country that is the very first of its kind to have a teacher residency model that is where our state affiliate is actually granting the teachers. So our WA teacher residency program, it's really flowing from a place of equity. We want to prevent those barriers from occurring in the first place. So I will be carrying this portfolio of experience and hard work, you know, into this next adventure. And, part of this work was thinking about how do we remove barriers from the first place to ensure that we can diversify the profession and ensure that our new educators will be able to stay in this very difficult job. This is, this means living wage. The tuition will only be $2,000. Childcare, travel, materials, textbooks, that's all paid for. And then once, our residents get their own classroom, they'll have a $2,000 material stipend. But of course, the living wage, retirement, and healthcare being paid for. I mean, I don't know anyone that can take a year off to, student teaching. Like, some states are banning student teachers from having a job. Those policies, we are now navigating around through the WA residency program. And on our design team, we actually have 4 FWA members of color who are doing that design work. So we're trying to, be centering equity, being extremely intentional in preventing barriers in the first place, to really think about how do we have racial, social, economic, and gender justice in our program. And that includes LGBTQ justice, of course, for our students that we're serving, but also, of course, our members that we are bringing into this profession. Secondly, or not secondly, but one of the last points I wanted to raise too is that one of the solutions that I would be really interested in helping spread across the country. We have a program called the Nakia Academy. It's educators of color who are compensated to become mentors. So it's educators of color training other educators of color to be mentors. And when there's this space, this time, and these dedicated resources for educators of color to mentor one another and train them how to be mentors themselves, and continue to perpetuate that culture, it really has been a powerful way of retaining educators, but also giving a longer term relationship and networking space for those who have really been subject to a lot of microaggressions, macroaggressions, especially now in this heightened time. So that is another extremely rewarding program that I would be interested in lifting up and replicating. And our program, just to plug it, our Nakia Academy is actually the first in our state that includes ESPs, which is really exciting. One of our little dreams is that one of our ESPs is actually going to be in the teacher residency program and one day be a teacher if they want to. Question number 2, what plans do you have to address the intersection of AI and education in relation to curriculum, lesson planning, plagiarism, academic dishonesty, preparing for an AI-ready workforce, and NEA's organizational systems and staffing, and algorithm bias? Okay, I was so excited to see this question. It's something that I've been talking a lot about lately, just, with friends, and wondering, where it's going, because it's here. And I don't think AI is going away anytime soon. And so I really appreciate this forward-thinking question, because yes, as the nation's largest labor union, we absolutely need to be thinking about this. And I fundamentally think that we are extremely underprepared for AI. So again, I would be eager to immediately partner with you, our AE leadership, to be considering its impact, and also to be considering what we are putting forth as solutions. David Hogue was on Twitter recently saying that, hey, it's pretty good now, but it's scary how good AI is going to be in about 5 years. One of the strategies that is kind of separate from AI is also investing in experiential learning. So again, the year-long teaching residency is part of the WA teacher residency model. Thinking about critical thinking, community building, relationship building, time management, so many of those important strategies that we need to emphasize in our organizing to make sure the experiences are good for not only students, but also incoming educators. I just wanted to kind of lift that up at the beginning of this answer, because that is a separate mind frame of what education can be, apart from all of the technology that we're now incorporating. So I think that's just something important to lift up in this moment. One of the strategies that I would be immediately employing is to examine our membership for member experts who are already doing this work and are already experts and very well versed in AI and its impact. So that definitely could include our higher ed folks, our public service employees who are often working in tech and all of these sorts of fields that would be helpful to keep our members safe. our K-12 folks, and of course our aspiring ed, who, are now the new generation that's coming forward with always knowing, an iPad or a computer around. If we convene our own member experts to talk about AI, I know and I'm confident that we would be driving solutions forward, thinking about racial justice, social justice, climate justice, and economic justice. I cannot say that about every group that would be interested in AI, that's for sure. It would be really interesting to see if any state affiliates have any work around AI. Haven't heard of any, but I think it's still good to ask the question, even just when it comes to cybersecurity. But we truly have members that are sophisticated in AI usage. I know that there's some members, I saw a member out in New Jersey who's working with NFTs. I mean, there's members that are doing really good work in this, and starting with our member voice to address, okay, what are the issues that we need to take forward, but also what are the solutions we want to drive forward is really, really important to me personally as a leader. With this work, I know that we could leverage our relationship with the White House and other partners to advance our solutions. And I think there's such an intersectional impact of AI. Just even starting with a very, very real truth that AI is continuing to perpetuate racial bias and full-on racism in an extremely dangerous way. Again, when we talk about being underprepared for AI, I know that our systems are just completely underprepared for what AI will do for higher ed applications and other high stakes academic, situations, including deepfakes, which I am extremely worried about because our members in the classroom are not currently trained to decipher and interpret AI and academic dishonesty. So like AI-driven academic, dishonesty, of course, we're trained on how to, interpret and understand and kind of catch plagiarism, but this is a whole new game when it comes to things like ChatGPT. At this point in time, what I've seen is that the research is showing that when there's AI, they're developing new AI to try to catch if it's an AI-generated writing sample, for example, and that secondary AI systems have been just terrible at catching AI generated plagiarism. And so we have members who are being put at a very real, dangerous situation, a very real kind of threat or impact if our members are being asked to use AI to interpret or catch plagiarism when these tools are showing, very, very, very worrisome numbers, like up to 30% or 40% of plagiarism is getting by these secondary AI tools, and our members are just not prepared at all in these situations. So claiming that a student is committing plagiarism is a very, very, very big problem. And we're underprepared for that. And I think we do not have any kind of model advocacy language created to support and protect members that are being put in this situation. So I think, the best antidote is obviously relationship building, knowing all of our students. And there are, there's barriers of that when class sizes are so big and, standardized testing is being shoved down our throats. But that true education of building community, building relationships with students is such an antidote because our students writing at that point, right? You have a good relationship with them. I don't expect AI to go away anytime soon. I'm sure you don't either. So I think that we really have to put a fine point on how AI can ultimately serve to negatively impact those who are already marginalized by multiple systems. If we're kind of thinking that AI in terms of academics is in its infancy, then the impact of regulation at this point is going to be critical, and our voices in that process are going to be required, again, so that we are ensuring, racial, social, economic, and gender justice in the regulation of AI. I think that, AI scraping the internet for IDs and photos and, doing that kind of AI learning, it's really problematic because who's doing that work is, these corporate forces that genuinely don't have our students or members' interests at heart. We haven't gotten ahead of that, and that is, something that's likely going to continue. And, our aspiring educators, for example, many of them are coming forth at a time where they've been on Instagram for years. And that's a different reality than, maybe some folks that are in their 50s that maybe have only been on Facebook for, 15 years, for example. So I think our AEs not only have the wisdom, but also have a lot to risk in this conversation. And if AI is going to be a facet of society, I think we really have to have the conversation about what regulation or even nationalization looks like so that everyone has access to AI, as opposed to just, corporate powers using AI for profit. I think we can all kind of, I'm not going to say laugh, but I think we can all kind of snicker maybe at the fact that Congress likely be, doing a large part of the regulation. And I know we have some members of Congress that are barely able to use a cell phone. So it's really, really important that we're having this conversation. I know that there's certain draft laws like the US Algorithmic Accountability Act, and EU is doing some really good work on this. I haven't necessarily seen some good state level work yet, but those are some legislative pieces that NEA could be lifting up, and I would be very interested in partnering with you if you're interested in doing a legislative amendment now for this RA. Before I even get elected, let's maybe partner on that. And I'm not before I hopefully get elected. So I think two other just very recent examples too that I think could be helpful to lift up is, some of the educators I've talked to recently have been playing around with ChatGPT since it's been in the news, and I have heard from a couple teachers that using that has been a workload relief, because you can ask it to just create, a math worksheet and give it some parameters, and then boom, it's, in like 30 seconds, it's producing a worksheet that, may have taken you a couple hours. So I think there is going to be an interesting, conversation about that in terms of workload relief. I think the other interesting thing is AI is being used in our WA research or WA teacher residency program to be a low risk environment for the teacher residents to actually practice a lesson, and the AI is the students. And so it's the students are an extremely, they're AI programmed. The focus was really having a diverse student body, and running through lessons in a very low risk environment was a way for, the educator to get a chance to practice, but also to avoid that kind of guinea pig scenario where, potentially underprepared folks are interacting with educators or with students of color. And there's kind of this like, hey, why are you treating me like a guinea pig scenario? So it was one step to, create a low risk opportunity for teachers to, or the aspiring educators in their student teaching program to feel more equipped and comfortable when they went in and served the real life students the next day. So the feedback of that has actually been really, really strong. You can even program the students to have different languages and things like that. So it's, our kids right now, our students in school are going to graduate to a world that's going to be completely different academically, given AI's quick advancement. So I appreciate this question so much, because it really is our responsibility to get on top of this issue and decide where it's going. So would be very happy to partner with you, given the opportunity. Number 3, the professional landscape and the qualifications it demands are rapidly changing, contributing to the rise of cost of college, a wave of underemployment, and a growing demand for blue-collar workers. How will you direct NEA to respond to this shift demand in the professional workforce? Yeah, great question. I think of two things initially. This is a really key moment for partnership and for organizing. When we have a strong member base of member organizers prepared and equipped to organize, members, students, and community, then we are ready to tackle any problem that comes our way. Especially with the vast and quickly changing landscapes, I think it's really critical that we're devoting a lot of time and resources to ongoing leader identification, training, and community solidarity, so that we can change the whole system. Not just the educational system, but our economic system and many other systems that are really interconnectedly oppressing folks, including communities of color. Organizing will also be the force of which our locals and states can ensure that our students' needs are being met in the first place, especially now in this time that we're emerging from the pandemic. when we think about the careers that our kids may have one day, I mean, those careers may not exist yet. And if we are able to organize and focus on building power that way, then we can help stamp out these corporate efforts to have standardized testing and, canned curriculum and these just corporate bad ideas that are not good learning experiences. But it takes organizing to be able to make those wins. In a quickly evolving world, those skills like communication, team building, empathy, there are some really important skills that should be taught in school and that we need to be able to have the time to teach. And that, that's up to us in terms of what our profession is going to look like. And that comes through organizing and having strong unions. Our students deserve the opportunity to choose whatever they would like to do, if that's higher ed, if that's, going through the trades or some other job. But when we're organizing and building power with community partners, it gives our students much more opportunity, and it gives our folks coming into the profession, a more fulfilling work experience as well. I think one thing on this note too, in terms of the rapidly evolving dynamics, and I kind of touched on the unfair and upside down economic situation that's going on with housing, healthcare, things that are just getting so expensive. In terms of career prep, our CTE is also a really exciting pathway that NEA could do some more thinking on in terms of how to, close opportunity gaps. There's a whole host of legislative solutions that, are tied to this, but the federal funds that are coming through CTE and helping us create teacher pathway programs, but also other amazing programs like auto body and dental and nursing, within the public school system, there really are some incredible opportunities there to be creating jobs where our students are being offered, family wage earnings as they're graduating, 12th grade. So I just wanted to flag that too as another exciting opportunity that could be a closer term solution in the meantime, as we organize and build solidarity in communities and win things legislatively like, universal basic income, fix these upside down tax, systems and, healthcare costs, because, those are big solutions, and through organizing, we can win them in sustainable ways. Number 4, yeah, speaking of economics, several states introduced bills to pay student teachers. What do you think are major barriers for AEs? And if elected, how will you use your position to address these barriers? Yeah, so I really appreciate this. If elected, I am really, really interested in ensuring that our conversation of and really class consciousness is front and center in our work. In a previous answer, I kind of talked about the WA teacher residency program, but we need to be paying our student teachers a thriving wage. You can't just have a year where folks don't have medical insurance or wage. I mean, like, this is complete exploitation, and it cuts down gender and racial lines when you look at who we want to invite into the profession. And the compensation for mentors, for example, so that we can have a diverse, mentorship field. I would continue to be lifting up the racial, social, economic, and gender justice dynamics of, unpaid labor, including student teaching, and really thinking about working with our state affiliates and caucuses and NEA to further the mission of fully paid student teaching. I testified on a bill a couple weeks ago on this topic, looking to build out those cadres across Washington state. Because again, we can't have just unpaid, exploited pathways as a tangible and sustainable solution to diversifying our workforce. The main question here also talks about barriers in general. So I've spoken a little bit about, economic barriers, rent, healthcare, food is getting more expensive, childcare, and, that often cuts down those gender lines when we're trying to think about, healthcare and reproductive freedom being absolutely a financial, barrier. But these pieces are so intersectional. Thinking about entering the workforce, remaining in the workforce, And I really fundamentally believe, and I've been talking a lot on this campaign of how we can't have racial justice without economic justice. The fact that our public schools are so underfunded also presents a barrier because there's a lack of support for both our incoming aspiring educators and for our early careers, educators, and then of course our students that we're serving. So these are barriers right off the bat because large class sizes, crumbling buildings, students with significant trauma through no fault of their own who are now under supported, and maybe there's only one counselor for 600 kids, for example. This creates these such difficult learning conditions that will potentially impact the rest of their academic career. But also these conditions are so untenable that it pushes our early career educators out or burns them out. And that's in this context of this greater context of these culture wars that are throwing these curveballs at folks. And when our AEs are not offered the high level preparation to be able to deal with these unprecedented situations of parents upset when we're trying to teach you the truth, or kids more and more students facing just these complex needs, that is a absolute barrier to being able to stay in the profession. I think I know that our AEs have been talking also about like the bigger existential threat of climate change, and I'm so appreciative for your leadership on that because it's here, it's now, and the people that are going to be most impacted by it are the students in our buildings right now and our AEs for leading the charge on fixing it. We've talked a lot at the RA over the past couple of years about the over policing of our students and our AEs on campuses and how much of a problem that is, as well as things like gun violence, underfunded mental health care, threats to reproductive freedom and child care costs. Particularly as we emerge from the pandemic and how much more complex everything's gotten. I personally worked, 3 jobs to get through college, but I had a car and I had, white privilege, and I was lucky enough that my parents offered me cheap rent, but it's so much, and things have just gotten harder. So thinking about the barriers that our AEs are facing right now, the economic just question mark of how to get through the month oftentimes, let alone the economic barriers and challenges that our students are facing. It's a lot to carry. So I think I want to bring forth again that if we are talking about economic justice, that we're making sure that our AEs are at the table to talk about these problems in a first person way. And I was so pleased last year or 2 years ago when we were able to have our AE Week of Action on the Hill to address the teacher shortage and lift up, these economic impacts. And of course, this has kind of been our bigger backdrop of the civic threats to democracy, including gerrymandering and voter suppression. Those are really compounding impacts to our BIPOC communities and working class. So I think, last piece, there's a lot, and that's why I think fundamentally investing in organizing and ensuring that we are identifying leaders and creating this, robust culture of organizing will prepare us to solve different issues all across this country in the communities and, about the things that our members care about. Multiracial, generational, multiracial coalitions, electing good legislators. I mean, that happens through organizing. Winning things at the bargaining table, that happens through organizing. Pushing on some of these higher ed institutions to have much better, programs, that's organizing. So I keep on coming back to that as an unapologetic person who loves organizing. I see that as our way forward. Last question. How do current evaluation assessment practices for AEs seeking teacher certifications such as EdTPA impact to those from marginalized communities? Okay, I've spoken about this a lot. I hate the EdTPA. Let's get rid of it. I hate it. I have seen the data. I think we've all seen the data on how it is fundamentally a gatekeeping mechanism to keep our diverse educators out of the profession. The test alone is terrible, but then the process of taking the test is also another barrier. It really is this money grab that is kind of an extension from the corporate little tentacles that are getting into all of our schools. It costs our AEs money that they don't have. It's even worse if you have to retake it. And who is likely to have to retake it? Well, because of the systemic issues with this test, oftentimes our BIPOC aspiring educators are having to retake this test. And, the compounding impact with potentially having to take time off to take the EdTPA and do all of that hard work. And then, the other tests once you are just ready to get your certification. I mean, I'm with you on this. This is terrible. And I appreciate your leadership on wanting to dismantle and get rid of these horrible tests. I was one of the first years in Washington State that had to take a pilot. It is also a violation of our students' rights, in my opinion, because corporations don't deserve to have access to our student privacy when you're filming these videos of their learning just so that you can get your teaching cert. I mean, it was really horrible situation to be put into, to tell parents, hey, do you mind signing this thing so I can get my teaching cert? And submitting a video of their kid learning. And I'm a special ed teacher, so that brings a whole nother level of privacy concerns. I think these tests, not only with complete racial bias, but there's also for folks with disabilities or any other exceptionality, like potentially being trilingual and taking these tests that really don't have much relation to reality. Those are a whole other layer, that a necessary layer of these tests and assessments. I think fundamentally too that these tests are just pure on gaslighting, because when you're being trained as an educator, you're building relationships, you're building community, you're learning the content, and building that solid learning community where everyone feels safe, welcome, and affirmed. And then you have to turn around and take these just inauthentic, sometimes multiple choice tests that are classist and racist in nature. It is gaslighting and it is offensive. We worked in our state to get rid of EdTPA, but there's still barriers, and we still have some work to do to fully get rid of it. And in my capacity as a local president, I've also helped some of our members who have been an eCert, for example, and be striving to get their special education certification. And I've worked with our state affiliate to support members one-on-one to do the portfolio process, for example. But I mean, I remember talking to someone who had taken this test 13 times. I mean, when you talk about like compounding impact, she was a phenomenal educator. She was a Black immigrant woman who had a child with special needs. So she personally and professionally cared about special education. But, she wasn't a native English speaker, and these tests were just, that bad. So yeah, we successfully worked with the State Department and was able to get her, all set with the portfolio process. But, it shouldn't have to be that hard for a phenomenal educator to just get the basic, check the box. But, we did win that one, but it shouldn't take that, right? These are really unnecessary barriers, particularly in a national teacher crisis. I think one of the other, I mean, it's not explicit in the question, but to lift up that when we do have teacher prep programs, the mentor experience, or even like the field supervisor, we still see barriers that are being set up in that process. So for example, if we're encouraging and supporting a lot of young women of color into the profession, it's really problematic when we have, for example, an older white man as the supervisor coming into this classroom, seeing a young educator of color who is very successful, building great relationships, absolutely equity centric, but maybe that's not in the exact rubric, or maybe that's not the mentality and experience of this field supervisor. There still are these institutional barriers, and a bias evaluation should not be a problem in 2023, but we know it is. I think that that's one of the parts of the WA teacher residency that I'm excited about, is trying to build a program that doesn't have any barriers in it. But when we think of this system that really hasn't changed that much, there's just these systemic issues that really highlight how our aspiring educators are the nexus of racial, social, economic, and gender justice. And, I'm really hopeful that our AEs will continue to be such a loud voice at the RA, but also, if elected, I'd just be so thrilled to partner with you all in all the work we do to really make sure that our schools are the common good and quality experience that all of our students and all of our AEs and early career educators and our union. So again, just thank you all so much. I probably could talk for more, but I know I've taken up quite a bit of time. So I just want to say again, just solidarity and gratitude with everything you're doing all day on top of all your coursework, for our schools and then also in our union, making sure that our union is what we need it to be, especially in this moment. So take care. And I guess I should do the campaign piece. I do have a Facebook page. It's Shannon McCann for NEA Executive Committee. On there, you can see some of the endorsements, for example. We've been really happy to receive, of course, my own state, Washington, NCUEA, the National Council for ESPs, National Council for Higher Ed, TNT, which is South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana. And California Teachers Association is recommending me for their assembly. So we've been, really excited that in all of these circles, that we have a lot of support for our campaign. So I'm very hopeful and would be really humbled to work alongside you in this role. And I wish you all the best again with everything that you're doing. And I really appreciate the consideration. Take care.